So this is a guitar neck model from the Fusion forum and looks eerily similar to a model that I've seen in an Austin Shaner tutorial. And I think, if I remember that correctly, he also mentioned sometimes he has problems creating these patches. And that is exactly what this user is encountering. So when he uses the patch tool and then selects these sketch curves and these edges here as the boundary for patching, it does not create a patch, just like there would be a selection of something missing. And I dug into this problem, and I've also reported that a few months ago to the Fusion team. I think the reason for that is, call it connections. It might be in this case this this connection between those two curves here, but there's a way around this. I personally very rarely work with intersection curves because they often exhibit curvature problems that are not present in the original sketch, and that same applies to offset splines and generally curves and edges that are projected into sketches that are not coplanar to the original edge or curve. So what I mean with curvature problems, that's the wrong tool. It's a sketch curve, so I have to select the sketch curve and right click and say toggle curvature display, and that doesn't look smooth, right? So if I go to the original sketch here, I have to find it first. So I need that sketch for later. So that intersection curve was basically a cross section or an intersection of this curve here and the curve in that sketch that I'm highlighting here. And oops, I should have actually switched it on there. And so between this curve here and this curve here. So what I am going to do instead, and before I do this, let me select that curve. So obviously that curve is smooth, and okay, and this curve also is smooth. It's just that the intersection curve isn't. Okay, so I prefer to work with, particularly for patching, but generally with surface work, I prefer to work with edges of surfaces, and I'll do that here as well. So I create a flat patch. A flat patch is always good because it's just a flat trimmed surface. It's an analytical trimmed surface. But generally the patch tool, which actually succeeded here, is a tool of last resort. So why is that patch tool a tool of last resort? It's called a boundary patch. It's just called patch here, but on the forum and in conversations with the Autodesk folks, it's called a boundary patch. And this edge here, for example, also looks not so great. And this edge here also doesn't look so great. So this edge was created from a intersection curve as well. I've shown this on the other side, and the reason for this broken curvature, or one of the reasons for that, is that intersection curve. But this edge here was not created from an intersection curve. It was actually created using a little helper surface that I have to find. There it is. And if I take a look, that helper surface is just an extrusion. And if I take a look at that curvature, it will be the same here on the inside. It is perfectly smooth. So what's the reason then that this edge here, that was created from that surface, isn't really smooth at all? Well, a boundary patch is a NURB surface. It's an arbitrarily curved surface, and NURB surfaces are always quad faces. And what Fusion does under the hood, it creates a squat face, basically like a tablecloth that's kind of stretched over all the boundaries. And then when it's created that, call it tablecloth, it basically trims off the edges. So that's basically that quad face. And we can see that none of the edges of that quad face align with any of the edges that we selected for the boundary. So in cases here, for example, where it's trimmed, or in here, where we have that curve, the curvature of that edge isn't so great, which is, as I said earlier, that boundary patch tool is more a tool of last resort. So either way, as I said earlier, I prefer to work with surfaces for boundaries, and I need to turn chaining off here, and I'm just going to extrude this up to object and then pick this here. Okay, and my sketch is gone again. There we go. And of course, I'm going to do the same here. And also to object, although in the next step I'm going to trim this off, and I'm going to trim this off with this curve here. And if I take a look at the curvature comb here, instead of that intersection curve with what was rather coarse, this looks perfectly smooth. So again, another reason for me to work with intersection curves. So now, also what I often do, I stitch all that together. I'm not sure I have to in this case. Let me hide all the sketches. So in theory, I have everything I need to create that boundary patch. Well, not quite, because I need to be able to select only part of that arc. So I'm going to simply split that face with the origin plane, and then I should be able to do that. Can't do that either. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to stitch all that together. And that makes life easier already. I think I should be able to enable chaining. And bam, there's our patch. So I can, for the appropriate edges like edge 9, edge 1, edge 5, and edge 4, maybe even edge 2 and edge 3, I can enable tangents here, and it will create a patch. And the reason that this works is I only have one of these point connections. That's what I earlier said. The reason for is not patching is if there are too many of these point connections. So also, it's usually not a good idea to create new geometry from edges that aren't so great. So if I would use this edge, it's yes, it is a patch that I'm creating, and the resulting edge is going to be great anyway. But let's say we wouldn't want to use that. We would use something else, like a little helper surface. Then I would have to create that little helper surface first, and that is easy. I create a extrusion, you turn chaining off, and just extrude that here. And if I hide my sketches, so I can select this, 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 this. Oops, I forgot this one here. And it does not, it doesn't recognize it, even though I've selected those in the wrong order. And let me do that again. But I've tried this before, and that does not actually matter. I mean, the order in which I select those, as long as they form a close border. So we can see that this forms a close border. But again, we have this point connection here, we have this point connection here, and this point connection here, which Fusion has trouble with. It has trouble with it. 2 is fine, but 3 apparently isn't. So how do I work around that? Come on, there we go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to simply create a loft that I don't actually need for the end model, but only in order to provide that, that shouldn't be this, that should be a rail. I only need this to be able to patch this here. So let's set all that to tangent, tangent, tangent. Okay, stitch this together. Okay, so now I should be able to patch this. So it does that. So 2 of these point connections is okay, 3 is not okay. So this is, this is how you do this. This is the second form of workaround. I said earlier, I also don't work with offset splines. So this edge back here is created from an offset spline. And that offset spline is right in the first sketch, if I remember that correctly. Yeah, yes it is. So if I edit that sketch, if I take a look at the curvature of this offset spline, it looks wavy, but it's smooth waves in a sense. You could probably delete 2, 3, or 4 of these spline fit points and then work with the tangent handle to get the shape you're looking for. But the offset spline, that curvature is absolutely atrocious, and I would definitely not create I would not create geometry from that. Although some of what I'm saying here might not be so important for a model that's going to be CNC machined and then send it anyway. But generally, if you like your curvature, avoid these pitfalls that I've discussed here. So hopefully this helps.